Tea Break Lecture Series number 8, and today we'll be taking a bit of a step back and looking at the context of landscape in its functionality, and it may seem a little bit tangential to the work of heritage professionals, but I believe that we have a role in shaping great places and looking after the environment, and the landscape is the canvas on which we all work. So hopefully this will be of some interest. It may not be directly relevant, but it should maybe provide some insight, and it give you some advance warning if this crops up in any of your project work. Just by introduction, I'm a director at LDA Design, Landscape Architecture and Environmental Consultancy, a fellow of the Landscape Institute and a member of the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists, and a member of the advisory group for the Landscape Special Interest Group. So just for context, there's widespread recognition that our natural environment is under threat: climate change, new development, infrastructure, industrialized farming, all threaten to degrade the landscape. And as a result of the degradation of the landscape, we're degrading the stocks of natural capital and the ecosystem goods and services that flow from those natural capital assets. And we depend on those not just for nature, but also for a range of important things that underpin our health and well-being in our economy, such as clean air and water, and things like that. A healthy, functioning landscape is essential to our economy, our livelihoods, and our physical health and mental well-being. And it underpins our identity and sense of place. And it's within that area that probably the historic environment plays a really important role. The landscape tells the story of our civilization. The interaction we've had with nature is manifest and evident in the layers of history in our landscapes and townscapes. And that really is important for character and the places that people feel affinity with and that contribute to their sense of place and identity. So without appropriate emphasis being given to protecting and enhancing and creating stocks of natural capital, we're going to struggle to achieve sustainable development, and genuinely good design will be impossible to deliver. There's an imperative for us to act as professionals if we are to be the good ancestors that we aspire to be. This graphic just shows a rather frightening trajectory of how the decline in the natural world and our landscapes are diminishing. If we remain on a business as usual trajectory, we will be way below what's an acceptable level of natural capital, and we're at risk of really damaging for the long term the future of the country and the environment. We have to get back on an orange trajectory where we increase conservation efforts, and ideally get ourselves onto the green trajectory where we're really addressing sustainable modes of production and consumption and increasing conservation efforts. The UK is already one of the most nature depleted countries on the planet, so we start from a low base after several centuries of industrialization and industrial farming. So we really have to collectively get our landscapes back on track. To do that, we all need to challenge how we undertake our work. We need to challenge the business as usual approach that's previously focused on design delivery and maybe superficial outcomes, and find ways of working that focus on delivering tangible outcomes for society and the economy and the environment. To do that, at LDA Design, we use what's called the ecosystems wheel, and that just helps us think about the interventions that we make and how they could deliver better cultural provisioning, regulating and supporting ecosystem services. using nature-based solutions, natural capital, to deliver the things that we all depend on. Just by example, in urban environments, some of those environmental, social and economic benefits include improved recovery times from illness, reduced stress and mental well-being benefits, improving the public realm for social interaction and recreation. Providing a sense of place and continuity with the past is again really important in the world of the heritage professional. Natural capital sequesters and stores carbon. It provides a habitat. It reduces the impact of noise if designed well, intercepts rainfall to slow infiltration and reduce the risk of flooding. So as you can see, the right interventions in the right place all stack up and deliver environmental and social benefits. They can also deliver economic benefits, reducing impact on health services if people are fitter and mentally more healthy. It can increase property values and can increase productivity. And there is evidence out there that supports some of these findings. It also applies in the semi-natural environment, similar sorts of social, environmental and economic benefits can be derived from the natural capital in areas of farmland, rural areas, etc. For example, agroforestry, sources of food and fodder and wild food. It can provide shelter for crops, etc. So there's a whole range of things that we can do to maximize the benefit through good planning, good design, and heritage professionals, I strongly believe, have a role in this to a greater or lesser degree. And just by an example, this is an example of how on the left conventional drainage design addresses the water quality and quantity issue and has an impact on land and property value. But if you take a nature-based solution, considering natural capital and the ecosystem service flows from those natural capital assets, if you design it right using nature-based solutions, you can have an input on improving air quality, you can deliver community benefits, you can improve economic health, biodiversity, as well as addressing those fundamental water quality and quality requirements. So just close by just covering the concept of environmental net gain and cover the environmental benefits from nature tool, which a lot of colleagues are finding interesting to explore and just understand how they can interact with these concepts. So environmental net gain was mentioned in the 25-year environment plan, and it's mentioned in various documents that have come out since. And environmental net gain builds on the biodiversity net gain principle to include a focus on the natural capital assets and the associated ecosystem services those natural capital assets they can provide. So I think in simple terms, if we can deliver biodiversity net gain with the right interventions in the right place using nature-based solutions, we can also use that biodiversity net gain to deliver wider environmental net gains with the landscape. The process of assessing an environmental net gain is an emerging area of expertise and practice. It can be complex and multidimensional, and when it's done well, it includes a range of experts, technical experts and stakeholders, such as heritage professionals, landscape professionals and ecologists, hydrologists, etc. There's no industry standard decision-making tool or metric at the moment to measure or demonstrate an environmental net gain has been achieved. So it's emerging, and I think it's quite an exciting way to consider how we interact with design and placemaking. The application of professional judgment can be supplemented and supported through the use of decision support tools, which provide a degree of objectivity and consistency. One of the key tools that we've looked at is has been developed by Natural England with DEFBRA, the Forestry Commission, the EA, and Oxford University, and that's called the Environmental Benefits from Nature tool. And as I said before, this one specifically works directly with the biodiversity metric, and it provides various interested parties with the means of enabling and recording the wider benefits for people and nature. So building on that biodiversity net gain principle to deliver wider benefits in a demonstrable way. The tool itself seeks to help users understand the impact of proposed land use change on the services nature provides, encourages positive change through improved consideration of nature-based services in project design, and it may be used as a start to a broader conversation around local needs, impacts, priorities, and opportunities to deliver the right gains in the right places. The tool, when it's used, highlights the projected impact of a proposed change across 18 different ecosystem services, and it displays the impact over a 30-year period. And if it's built into an iterative design process, can mean that there's various options that can be considered and tested to come to the optimal outcomes. If applied correctly, it can highlight the potential individual service gains and losses, remembering that interventions can reduce ecosystem services as well as increase them depending on how they're designed and delivered. And it helps us understand the relative size of the change. At present, the environmental benefits from nature tool is voluntary and not a requirement of legislation or policy that I've seen. However, it represents a common, consistent and evidence-based method for recording environmental outcomes. If we were to use it or engage with it as part of multidisciplinary teams, it will require us to engage in it early and throughout the iterative process. There will be trade-offs, and that could result in the maintenance of some baseline conditions, an increase in certain ecosystem services that are of identified benefit, or a reduction in others. But it's critical that these are judged according to context. Any losses are minimized where possible. They're reasonable and well explained. And we find that if we think about this, we try and gear the environmental net gains and the ecosystem benefits to really address local need and requirements through consultation and exploration of a site in its context. If anyone's interested, there's a really helpful introductory video on YouTube, and you can find that by following these links, and I'll pop these in the chat after I finish this talk. And the Natural England Green Infrastructure website provides further details and links to a lot of the collateral that relates to understanding and applying the environmental benefits from nature tool. And that is it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share that, and I hope that was of some tangible interest to people joining us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much, Ian, for your presentation. I might refer to that later on. It's really informative. To all, thanks for this opportunity. I appreciate the chance as an interloper from the world of the unpaid to offer some insights and experiences for you to reflect on. I've put the strap lines on this opening slide just to give you some idea of what my perspective on archaeology is. And I've adapted phrases and material from the sources below, from CIfA, from Landscape SIG, and also from Hannah Fluck's presentation back in January. Now, my supporting materials, which may have got to Cara by now, include a much more detailed background, the kind that Ian gave about my background in archaeology, involvement with CIfA, and especially community archaeology over the last 14 years. I'm not going to go over all that in detail now, just to say that I'm speaking in a personal capacity today. I don't represent any particular group or CIfA SIG committee or the parish council. I'm talking to you as somebody who's been a serial volunteer, especially in the North Pennines, and you have a North Pennines perspective, and has been for the last year a parish councillor in Weardale in County Durham, where I live, which gives you a very different perspective on the kind of discussions that and ideas that Ian was putting forward. So that's the program I want to go through. I've tagged with the chat icon where there are supporting materials. It should be in the chat, which I'm sure Cara can circulate at some point, which include links to websites and organisations, which I'm going to refer to later on. So if there's a way in which Cara can circulate those, that'd be very helpful. I'm aware from my professional backstory that coming in like I am from a different world, it's easy to tread on people's toes, if you like, and people say, well, look, this is all very ideal, but look at the conditions of working, look at the economics of what we do, look at the margins we're working to. And of course, that's a risk. There's very understandable reactions. I hope we'll be more constructive than that. And I hope you might take a moment to use this opportunity to pause and reflect on current practice and the cultures and structures that we're all working in, which underpin it. One last point on this slide. Under item 3, earlier lessons, I have not included the consultation on the National Policy Planning Policy Framework, which ended yesterday. Just in passing, I would say that having looked at some of the commentary that's been around and some of the webinars that have been produced, there appears to be a concentration in our perspective on items 19 and 20, end of the list, cultural and natural heritage. As a parish councillor, I'm looking up the list, sustainable business, etc., etc. And I'll come back to that later in the presentation. First, I'm going to talk about the first insight is from knowledge and skills exchange and transfer. Inside out ways of working is not my phrase. It comes from a project run by Karen Millick at Durham back in 2018, with Dig Ventures volunteers, community volunteers from Altogether Archaeology, which I belong to, and university students, where we processed samples from Lindisfarne in the labs at Durham University. The youngest person who took part, by the way, was 9 years old. And many of you will be familiar with Karen's article, which I do recommend. Transdisciplinary Archaeology and the Future of Archaeological Practice. And her straplines are citizen science, portable science, and ethical science. So since 2018, I've been lucky enough to be involved with her in projects using the Nuffield programme to continue offer you field work opportunities and lab-based opportunities for students, college students, and community volunteers. Some who've come from a very long way away, 40 miles away even, to take part. So in the light of those experiences, I've taken that comment from Hannah's presentation back in January and slightly amended it. People do love geoarchaeology and environmental when they're encouraged and enabled to do it for themselves. And the project I'm highlighting here, the workshop in 2023 with Altogether Archaeology, based on thin sections taken from the Holwick Wellhead site, which I've given you a slight insight to. I'll just try and zoom in if I can. So you've got one slide saying where the thin sections came from. There's more in the supplementary material. And you can read the whole reports on the Altogether Archaeology website, also listed on the supplementary materials. And you can see it was a project where in various different ways and levels, we were introducing beautiful thin sections to the group and enabling them to analyse them for themselves without any prior training or introduction. And as you can appreciate, we've got people who are very uncertain about doing any kind of science based on a past experience. There are 28 people. Their youngest was a GCSE student. And I've put in there the before and after on the day comments, which I put together as a Canva presentation. That's also in supplementary materials. It was very successful. The eye for detail the volunteers had individually and collectively was extraordinary. And just to give you an example, there's one of the slides. They homed in not just on the microstratigraphy, but also the individual items they wanted to know more about. So layer 4 is preserved organic material. The site itself is highly hostile. They can't even do geophysics up on it because of the magnetometry issues with the windstone there. And they were actually picking out items which we know from checking with ASDU in Durham actually are pollen. So you've got underneath this building, using the thin sections, an earlier structure, a timber structure, and the volunteers themselves are saying, well, what's this? And as you looked at it, they could see they were looking at preserved organic material, which shouldn't be in that environment, and at charred components of combusted peat. It was a really massive learning experience for me, and also I think for Karen, who was there as well, in terms of what people can do if given the opportunity and able to do it, and empowered to do so. And it was significant. We've got evidence for a timber structure unknown in our part of the world, survival of organic remains, and demonstration that skills transfer inside out ways of working show that the community volunteers have capability of identifying key features in geothin sections. They can do effective initial analysis. They can work out whether it's effective to spend more money on and get further and more detailed analysis by specialists. And I think it showed the evidence of the cost effectiveness of enabling and encouraging volunteer groups to request from people like you and I that they use citizen archaeological science in excavations and surveys. And I think that evidence suggests that these and other similar techniques, as Hannah was suggesting, should be part of the commercial and academic offer for community-led projects, not necessarily development-led projects. There is a question, of course, do commercial archaeologists and all academic departments have the equipment and the expertise, and more important, are they willing to allocate resources, people, time and money to doing that kind of work? So I'm going to the next slide now, and 2 short stories. There's no pictures for this. Regrettably, it's on the theme of knowing your patch. Cara will know about this because I did have a major grumble about this project. I'm not going to name the company concerned or the people concerned, and around the issue of community deficit modelling, what I've called. But I've got to say first that the 2 find stays which resulted from this community engagement by this company were excellent. People were informed, enthused, entertained, and inspired. They acquired new knowledge. They were working at the a defined level in the public engagement toolkit. And it's a great regret that I can't actually name the company and name the people who were involved. They even persuaded me to move away from my prejudice that Flint specialists are great storytellers and serial fantasists. It was a really great day, great 2 days. But at the end of it all, I went to the person in charge and said, look, what next? Because behind me, you can imagine there were 40 odd people with a huge range of experiences, digital photography specialists, second generation archaeologists, people who worked on oral history projects, people who run their own digs in Lonsdale, for example, who were connected with Orkney, Oxfordshire, Wales. That's part of a massive landscape of practice that's centred on this community of practice around altogether archaeology, which I'm a member of. And the answer to the question, well, nothing. We've completed the contract, the money's been spent, end of. And I said, well, knowing this person I was talking to was also involved in community groups, I said, well, don't you want to actually keep in touch with these people, find out what's going on around the region that your unit's based in? And we didn't answer the question. It wasn't really a fair question then. So I went back and looked at the companies and others like it, how they approach volunteering, and it's very much come to us volunteering. And I thought that was a little bit odd because my experience in other businesses is that you want to gather intelligence of what's going on. and be aware of the 3, 4, 5 year period of opportunities for building projects, developing funding streams, etc. And it appeared to be the case, I'm sure it's not really, that that regional business was not really interested in the knowledge and skills of the people who were there. And perhaps weren't thinking about, well, how do you leverage using that network funding from non-development-led project work and opportunities to augment, add to, vary your funding streams and your product portfolio. And that took me back to Hannah's presentation, where she talked about adaptive leadership and management, learning as we go, working together with other people, people in their places, that's a phrase she used, that we want to take with us. Now, I'll leave you that for you to think about. But it does strike me as that's something that needs to be part of the future development of archaeology in general through CIfA and other sources. So that was February this year. And the next one is literally last week. I'm calling this due diligence and contract specification. So yesterday, a 15-day village survey project started in my region. I'll be going there for the first time on Thursday. It was contracted by a regional agency, a well-established one, which when I started volunteering with it back in September, I discovered, for example, that it's run a large portfolio of archaeology projects over the past 10, 15 years. When I got there, there was no central archive. You couldn't actually get to your keyboard and draw down materials that had been used before about the places you're going to be working in, which I thought was a bit odd. And there was a question now about whether this environmentally focused agency really sees archaeology as a core business or a supplementary add-on. I had a conversation 4 years ago about, well, you're working on environmentally high value areas, and pound to a penny, looking at where those areas are, you were also looking at culturally high value heritage assets. I got no response to that. Now, I shouldn't have seen them, but I did, because I was shown them by one of the people working there, the contract and what had been awarded for. And it given to a CRC micro business from the south of England. And their community of interest is the public at large, anybody everywhere. But actually, it's working in a very tightly knit small area in a small village survey for people in a very particular place. And when I looked at it, it was like looking at what had been sent out by the previous project. It was a long list of things we're going to do. There's some broad ambitions to make people happier and feel more well-being and give them skills. And the regional agency had accepted that. And I looked at that and looked at my previous professional opinions and thought, right, if I'd been trying to award a contract on that basis, I'd have been given a good kicking. But I was also really fed up. I was fed up. Here again, an archaeologist parachuting and helicoptering in, assuming that nobody there has previous experience or relevant skills or contacts or networks that they can work with to plan this project. They didn't actually do, which is very easy to do now, online, a quick set of due diligence to work out who's there, what they've been doing, what they already know, and who can I work with, and what skills might they have, and how do we work a partnership approach to actually developing this project. So it looked like a deficit model for the needy and the unskilled at the lowest level of public engagement toolkit. And I'm sure it's not going to work out there when I get there, but on paper it did not look very good. And I have to say the CIC document, which I went and looked at, the registration document for the company, was just extraordinary in terms of how little it put in about what it was going to do, who for, and why to satisfy the registration. But it's got through. So you've got two stories there which say, well, look, we're out there, we have skills, knowledge, and experience, but both from the regional agency and from the professional archaeologists and commercial units, the mechanisms and structures aren't there, and the requirement, professional standards, if you like, to actually say, look, let's use these networks, let's collaborate, and let's build a partnership way of working at the highest level of the public engagement toolkit. I think it's item 3.4, where it talks about multiple stakeholders and co-production and co-creation. Now, that sounds like a big moan. There are massive opportunities here. And the group I belong to, Altogether Archaeology, if you go and look at their website, you'll see what skills they already have. They weren't even consulted by the regional agency, who uses them in their advertising as really good copy for what they've used in the past. So I'm not being cynical. I'm not angry about this, but come on, folks. Regionally, are we articulating a community of practice and the landscape of practice which will deliver those cultural and natural heritage benefits in the future? So that's the moaning bit over. I want to talk now about what I've learned from two recent projects. This one is part of a national community research network project funded by UKRI and the Young Foundation. It's a 5-year project, so that's actually quite unusual. You'd expect 2 years, wouldn't you? And there's a clear statement from UKRI there about what it's designed to do. I'm going to go through that, but it echoes what I've already been talking about. How it's done, who owns it, and how it's used. Now I'm going to just zoom in a little, and you'll see there are the pilot projects. This one here is down near Grimsby. This is us up here. And this one here is called Delano. It's in North Wales. It's actually got a history and archaeology component. None of the rest have, which is a little bit surprising, bearing in mind what it's trying to do. I've put the links in the supplementary material. I do encourage you to go and look at Community Research Network websites on UKRI and the Young Foundation to look at what's going on and how it's being done. What I want to draw your attention to is the one I belong to, the Rural Durham Community Research Network. It's been going for a year. It's just starting its 2nd year now. It's basically going through the process of getting people together, learning how to work together and learning from them what they want to do. Quite a lot of that is through creative projects, where creative project is the stepping stone to a more developed and refined community development project or activity. I'm going to highlight 2. Weird Al Together is based in Stanhope near me. It's run by Chris Powell and Kath Robson. And based on their previous work, which includes a community cafe and a creative arts space, they're working what they call safe spaces. Now, all those safe spaces you'd recognise as heritage assets. They're older buildings, underused heritage assets, some of them unused heritage assets. And I look at that and think, crikey, I wish we could do that in Walsingham, where we've got exactly the same problem. Now, that has an archaeology component to it, almost certainly, because some of those old buildings in Walsingham are industrial steelworks offices, for example. But what Kath and Chris, who runs what they call Weirdo Wordfest, are doing is using their creative activities to get people together and involve them in how do we make better use of the spaces we've got around us. Now their focus is mainly social and community. You'll find out later the mine's a slightly different direction. Now, Jack Durham Arts are based in Crook near me, small town, about 12,000 people, which began to lose its soul in the 1960s. And that process really accelerated in the 1980s with the loss of heavy industry, for example. And it's a place with some terrific heritage assets, but it's a bit down the hill and shabby at the minute. It's got a long way to go. Now, in there's Jack Durham Arts. They've been going for years. They're creative arts projects. They work with all sorts of particular groups. The latest initiative is with neurodivergent youngsters. Now, what they've done is they've got together young people, school age and slightly older, and they want to find out from them what their view of their heritage is in this slightly run down community, you know. I think that's really interesting. Wouldn't it be nice to know what young people want to see as heritage and what they want to make use of and value? Now, I did pass this information on to other people I know in Durham and involved in the World Heritage Site. So, look, do you know this is going on? Would you like to find out more? I think making those kind of connections is really important. The same thing applies to Wheel to Deal Together. It's not necessarily have to get involved, but do you know what's going on? Because in these places, they're telling stories about their past. They want to find out more. And it's leading to all sorts of things in terms of the stories people tell and the kind of placemaking that goes on. And you can see in that projects which archaeology can piggyback on or be a component of or even lead should the opportunity arise. I think it's a really exciting process. I'll tell you a bit more about it in a minute. And if you are close to or know of any of these projects, I really would encourage you to find out what's going on, because even if you can't get involved, there may be lessons that can be learned about how archaeology can actually embed it in the process of cultural and natural heritage and placemaking and place building around the country. An example I've got is I've got contacts with the Roman Carlisle project, and when two of them came to speak to us, I said, "Do you know about this project? And is there anything similar going on in an area?" And of course, they didn't. Same applies when I go back to the university and say, "Do you know about this project? Do you want to find out more?" And of course, they've got their own priorities and restricted, like all of you, restricted resources and time. So what does the network do? Well, you've got two foundations here. One is Durham Community Action. It's an amazing regional charity who disperse significant sums of money every year. They have helped fund altogether archaeology, but I think that's the only archaeology group they've actually got involved with who've gone to them. More importantly, with Durham University, the Centre for Social Justice and Community Development. Now, I'm going to say something here, which and name a name, which perhaps, but if you see an opportunity to get involved with the Participatory Action Research Network and any courses or conferences run by Sarah Banks, which involve drawing in community groups from around the Northeast, you have got to go. 4 years ago, I went on the first one, and it's fair to say it changed my understanding of what action in the community actually means, how you build up from the bottom. And it's truly inspiring. I see health, I see psychology, I see social sciences involved in big ways in this. I have yet to see archaeology involved. And you go back to my strap line, one of the first strap lines is archaeology is a social process. So that's really disappointing. But inspiring, supportive, massive learning. What they then do is support the research network. And what the research network does is offer training. It provides a network, which it calls its community of practice, which meets 6 weekly. Between the members of that group and the experts and knowledge of the trio underpinning it, we support and sustain each other, because things never work smoothly. They also share ideas, they bring in experience from elsewhere in the country. And above all, rather than being the project directors for Weird Together or Drac Drum, the role of the academic and the community action is to support through mentoring. It's a knowledge for change pyramid, and knowledge for change is the title which they use for all their introductory workshops. Now, for those of you who are close by, those workshops are happening in Weardale next week on the 18th, and in Barnard Castle on the 23rd of this month. Information's there on the Rural Communities Durham Research Network. We've had no archaeology groups or universities last year. If you're around, please get to one of those workshops. Just come and listen. So it's about investing time and getting to know people, their stories and your stories, getting people together and finding a place to contribute to their projects to get archaeology in their conversation. I'll tell you, as a parish councillor, I've been that for a year, there's been no mention of heritage, local history, or archaeology at all, which is a bit odd. But you have to keep an eye on the bigger prize. Now, the bigger prize that Hannah mentioned last time in January was practical opportunities for engagement in nature, environment and culture through heritage activities. Now, as a parish councillor, as somebody who's involved in that aspect of local government, if you like, my interest is a lot more pragmatic. So I'm looking for opportunities to foreground and repurpose heritage assets, which there are a lot underused and unused in our area, to retrain and attract young people, massive issue. You know, my town's becoming a rest home for wrinklies like me. That's not fair, but that's how it sometimes seems. But above all, looking at ways of reinventing and revitalising rural business and industry in small local hubs. And that's really important. I can see archaeology has a role in, potentially in all of those. But my prime one is not at the policy level, nature, environment and culture, it's at the practical level. Heritage assets, young people, business and industry. So those creative projects, which there are many in archaeology as well, aren't just there for the creative project themselves. They are vehicles for enabling people to start to recognise and deal with those more practical problems facing rural communities like ours. Last of all, I'm going to talk about Pride in Place. I don't know if you've heard about it. I think it's due to launch next month in April. The nearest to me is a project in Towlaw and Crook North. I'll just zoom in a bit so I can show you what I mean. So I live down here in Walsingham. Towlaw, this red blob, is about 2 miles away. And Crook, the town I mentioned before, is down here. And there's been some launch meetings run by a local MP. I'll come back to them. But the one thing I will say about this area is, yeah, Towlaw's an industrial town. Started about 1843, and so was Crook. Origins probably about 1880. And actually, the rest of it is rural. So you're looking at an industrial disadvantaged community and a project focused on that in a largely rural area. And we're talking about natural and cultural capital. So the aim of the project's got three themes. Some of you may know it's offering a 10-year programme, offering, I think, to this project £2 million a year for activities which I would just characterise as bringing people together, restoring a collective sense of community. I'm calling that place remaking, focused on, amongst other things, heritage assets and buildings, but also public green spaces, the rural area, if you like, people can walk to. And the one thing that strikes me very strongly in places like this is the deep time that really is here, that's hidden by the old industry that people don't see. So I've put out some feelers about what might work and what kind of project might attract people's attention. One of which is around a small village called Thornley, which is much older than Towlaw, and so is the landscape around it, as are the landscape features. So can we find ways of getting archaeology involved in that, which may be around actually the improvement and redesign of the Thornley village hall? Nothing to do with archaeology to start off with, but a focus for that kind of activity. Now you can imagine that when they have these first Pride in Place public meetings, you can go and look at them on Facebook, in Towlaw and in Crook. There weren't many people there. Mostly had grey hair. I suspect quite a few were infirm. I did spot one archaeologist, a well-known local osteologist who actually lives in Towlaw. And I thought things were coming up. When you say to people, what do you want? You'll get a list, which is the reverse of what the Rural Durham Research Project is about, which is actually building up the conversation and learning how to identify priorities so you can plan sensibly for sustainable initiatives that are going to last into the future. there's a lot of work to do there in Pride in Places, right at its very beginning. There may be a project near you. It's worth looking to see what's happening and can be done. So here's a question. I've taken this from the SIG Statement of Purpose and also from the Research Excellence Framework of 2029, the guidance for that. Section 6, Definition of Impact, and Section 682, Section 4, sorry, Section 6, Definition of Impact and Underpinning Research, which is Section 682. The question is, if you look at the direction which community-based research is taking, in the non-developmental end segment in particular, where do the unpaid contributors fit? Those who are engaged in research projects through charities, voluntary groups, businesses, similar organisations, how are these contributors recognised as part of a team and acknowledged as professionals rather than, sorry about that, than participants? I'm waving my hands quite badly, you can't see that. And the other thing, and this comes from me having been a head teacher and also seeing what universities have to do, have you got any idea, which universities have to have, and so do schools, what those unpaid contributors did next after a project that had finished with you?